Okay, now this is one of my favorite things to talk about with coaching because when we introduced this simple system into our church, at the last church where I was, it really started to make the coaching flywheel spin. And what I found is that it was because a lot of people, when you said, hey, go coach somebody, they might say, yes, I'm excited to do that. And they'll meet for coffee or they'll find a time to get together. And when they sit down, they look at each other and they kind of go, okay, what do we talk about? And I will be honest, to kind of throw my own gender under the bus, I really didn't seem to see this as a problem with ladies who would get together. They seem to do this naturally. But man, us guys, you put us down together one-on-one, and if it's not solving a problem or putting out a fire, it was like, what are we supposed to be talking about? So whoever you are, whatever your coaching experience has been, let me give you a simple system for the coaching conversation every time you get together, because here's what happens. When you have a simple system, even at the smallest level or at the lowest level, that simple system makes things easy to reproduce. You might be able to do or have this kind of conversation intuitively, but somebody else might come to the coaching conversation and go, I'm not quite sure what to say. But if we teach this and have the same language, then this is something that just about everybody can do. So let me give you sort of the 5 coaching questions that every time I get together. Now, I also say this is not a script. It would be a pretty unengaging, non-compelling, boring conversation if you as a coach got together with either your apprentice or your new leader or whatever and just said, held up these questions and said, and just repeated them. But this does become a framework for a conversation. Here is how I coach everybody. And I'm telling you, this is what I do with all of my direct reports at church. This is what I do with my kids. This is what I do with anybody that I'm trying to coach or disciple. I get together with them and I say, how you doing? Earth-shattering, right? I mean, earth-shattering conversation. How are you doing? But what I mean by that is, how are you really doing? I want to know how you're doing. Now, for me, I talk about RPMs. Came from Detroit. We're car capital of the world. And we would talk about RPMs because, you probably know this, if the RPMs of the engine start redlining, then the engine starts to be damaged. And it can run like that for a while, but not for long. Eventually it'll break down. And so, when I'm discipling somebody, when I'm coaching somebody, I'm going to ask, how are your RPMs? And what I mean by that is, how are you doing relationally? Tell me about your relationship with your spouse. Tell me about, do you have good, healthy friendships? Tell me about your kids. When we were planting the church at 242, it was a very busy time. And I remember my 4-year-old Luke, my wife told me this later, he started a conversation with her by saying, Mom, remember Dad? That's convicting. That's something's probably wrong if that's the way your 4-year-old starts the conversation. And so I would say, listen, if you're not winning at home, you're not winning. So, man, how are you doing relation? How are your relationships? Physically, how are you doing physically? Are you getting to the doctor? Are you eating right? Are you getting enough sleep? Tell me about, are you getting to the gym? How are you doing physically? Because we want to see people take their next steps with God, and that's part of that. Our bodies are connected to our spirits, our minds, and so how are you doing physically? And then how are you doing mentally? Are you believing the truth? Are you filling your mind with the Word of God? Or are you listening to Satan's lies about who you are? Are you getting depressed? Are you getting emotionally how are you doing mentally? Are you reading? Are you growing? How are you doing mentally? How's your anxiety? We talked about that last time. I wanted to check in on that because I care about you. I want to know how people are doing mentally and then spiritually. Now, the S is the last one because of RPMs, but the truth is that's the number one most important thing. Are you having time alone with God? How's your Bible time? Are you getting to church? How's your worship? Have you ever loved God more than you do right now? And if so, what are you going to do about it? Like, I love questions like that because here's the thing. I'm not just trying to raise up new leaders to perform functions. And when I'm coaching staff people, I'm not just interested in their performance. I'm interested in them. I want to know how they're doing. And so I'm going to ask the question, how are you doing? How are you really doing? Tell me about your RPMs. That's the first question when I'm coaching somebody. Here's the second question. Hey, where are you winning? Where are you winning? What's going well? What are you most excited about? Where are you seeing God show up? You know, that second question is to say, hey, in faith, like what are you most excited about and where are you seeing God show up? And here's what's interesting about that is it just creates and sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. Where are you winning? Third question I always ask is, hey, what challenges are you facing right now? Or what's the greatest challenge? Or I might ask the question, hey, if you could snap your fingers and God would do anything for you, I mean, just a miracle, well, what would you want Him to do? Or I'll ask the question. Again, I don't always ask the questions in the exact same way. I want this to be a natural, flowing conversation. But basically, I'm asking, what's the hardest thing going on in your life right now? And then the fourth question, now this is so important because after you ask that question about what challenges are you facing, a lot of us as coaches will immediately think that we have to solve it, that we have to give them the wisdom or fix it. And that's not necessarily the case. In fact, if you really want to see somebody grow, I love asking this fourth question. Hey, that's your greatest challenge? Okay. How do you think God is calling you to overcome that challenge? You see, I'm the coach. I'm not Jesus. I don't have all the answers. So I'm just asking them, hey, God is probably already speaking to them about how to overcome that challenge. I'm just trying to get them to open up their spiritual ears and their spiritual eyes and listen to the solutions and the things that God is already speaking into them. So how do you feel like God is calling you to overcome that challenge? And then you just listen. And then number 5, what's the most important thing I can be praying for you for this month? Or how can I make you more successful? Or what's the number one thing you're going to do before we meet again? I'm trying to figure out what is, after all the things we've talked about, what is that next step? Because I don't want to just be busy, I want to be productive. I don't want to just have spiritual conversations with somebody. I want to see people take their next steps with God. So I'm going to ask, hey, man, what's that one thing? And I'm going to try to bring them to that moment. Now, here's what's interesting is that once they share that with me, I'm just going to write that down. And that's how I'm going to be praying for them this next month or this next couple of weeks or this next week or whatever it is before our next coaching conversation. And then when I get ready to coach them again, whether it's 2 weeks later or a month later, I'm going to review my notes. I'm also going to look at how I've been praying for them. Or maybe I sent them an article throughout the month or whatever it is. I'm just going to review those kind of how I have processed that question. And then I'm going to come back to them in that next conversation. When we're going through the 5 questions, question number 2, where are you winning? Or question number 3, what's your greatest challenge? Guess what I'm going to be doing during those 2 questions? I'm going to be listening for whether or not they took that next step that they told me that they wanted to take last month. And I'm going to be listening for that. Whether it was, hey, I did it and it paid off and I'm winning and it's amazing how God is moving. Or, man, I've got this challenge and I tried to work on it last month, but it's just been very tough and it really is the thing that I still continue to struggle with, or whatever it is. I'm going to be listening for that thing. And I'm going to be kind of guiding the conversation, because here's what's so important. When you're coaching somebody and you ask a question like, hey, how can I be praying for you? Man, to be able to communicate to that person, you actually are praying for them. and thinking about them, that's so important. It's so encouraging for me when someone's coaching me. It's so encouraging for me, like a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever, for them to actually shoot me a text that say, hey, you asked me to be praying about this, and I am. Or to shoot me an article that says, hey, I've been praying for you, and this article came up that was about the challenge you had or the win that you had, and I just wanted to share it with you. You know, but if that hasn't happened throughout the time, when we get together to have our next coaching conversation, man, I better bring that thing up again with them so that they know that I am actively thinking about them. I am actively praying for them. And I am here trying to take some responsibility to help them take their next step with God.